Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Brooke, and if you're new here, this is a safe place for abuse survivors. This is where we break the silence, expose the darkness, and walk together from surviving to thriving. So today we're going to go and cover the 3 W's. That's what the world says, what science says, and what God says. And the topic today is, why didn't you just leave? We're going to cover the 3 W's on why didn't you just leave. So if you're ready, let's dive in. So the world says, why didn't you just leave? If the abuse was that bad, why didn't you just leave? Well, the world makes that statement from their comfortable position of having never been isolated or had their children used against them or economic control or all sorts of threats and danger. And so they make that statement and they say, why didn't you just leave? But they have no idea all the dynamics of abuse, which is what I'm trying to inform the world of. And so they think that, the abuse is just one gigantic explosion and it's a huge warning sign and you need to get out. But that's not what science tells us, and that's not what God tells us. And abuse is a lot more tricky than just one explosion of abuse. And if it was that easy, then of course, yes, we would just leave. But there's way more in the dynamics of abuse and control. And so that's what we're going to dive into today. So the world says, why don't you just leave? That statement actually protects the abusers, and it isolates the survivors even more because people are judging them and not understanding them and relating to them and trying to be a listening ear to them. Instead, it's just, come on, why didn't you just leave? It couldn't have been that bad. So we're going to dive into all the dynamics regarding this topic, and the next subject is what science says. Now we're going to talk about what science says about why didn't you just leave? According to the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence, 75% of domestic violence homicides occur at the time of separation or after separation. So that 75% of domestic violence deaths occur when the victim tries to leave and separate from the situation. The risk of homicide increases 500 to 700% when a victim attempts to leave. Those are terrifying statistics. So when somebody asks, why didn't you just leave? Well, because I was afraid and scared for my life. Because the statistics show that it's the most dangerous time period when a survivor tries to leave. That's why we need to have our red alert on, and we need to be paying attention to these survivors and listening to them so that we can help provide resources to them and protect them when they're trying to get out of the situation. So add the fear, right? The danger that you're literally in if you try to leave. And then add all of the dynamics of abuse, right? The trauma bonding, the financial isolation. If you have no money and you have no means to survive without this person, then it's really scary to try and leave. And then if you throw children in the mix, well, then you're threatened with losing your children. You're threatened with, harm to your children, and it gets harder and harder to leave. Also, it's really, unfortunately, but it's really easy to become blind to abuse. It's not some huge event like the world sees it. It's slow, systematic breaking down who you are as a person, and then the abuse, happens, and you kind of become blind to it. It's like the frog in boiling water. So if you put a frog in cool water and then you slowly add boiling water, the frog won't jump up and he'll boil to death because it's just something that he was used to. He became blind to the heat. It's the same thing with abuse. And that's unfortunately why a lot of survivors get stuck in abuse for so long. So that's what science says about it. It's dangerous and it's a mind game. And the two combined make it really hard to leave. Now let's see what God has to say on the topic of why didn't you just leave? So the Bible verse we're going to go over today is Proverbs 22:3. And that's where it says, "The prudent see danger and take refuge, but the simple keep going and pay the penalty." So sometimes staying is the wisest choice if leaving means death. Sometimes waiting for the right moment to leave is prudent when acting impulsively could cost you or your children your life. See, God's timing is perfect timing, and we may, fault ourselves for not getting out when we should have or for staying too long, but God has a plan for all of it, and He's not going to use any of it, against us. We do what we feel is right in the moment, and God is right there with us through it. And so we don't need the guilt or the shame of why didn't we just leave. We need the support and the love, like God's love. He's there for us, and His timing is perfect. And so we have to trust that our timing in getting out of the abuse is also perfect, and that everything happens for a reason, for the good of those who love God. And so it's just important that we don't shame the survivors for not getting out of the abuse, and that we trust that God had a plan in that, and that they're doing everything they need to do to survive, in that moment or in that period of time. Survivors have a lot that they're going through, and to make them feel shame or guilt about leaving is not what God says to do. And sometimes taking refuge and just staying in place is the safest thing that a survivor can do. So in conclusion, we talked about what the world says. The world says, why didn't you just leave? Well, science tells us that leaving is the most dangerous time in an abusive situation, and that the biochemical stuff going on in your brain makes it so hard to leave. And then God tells us that God's timing is perfect, and that we need to trust in Him and put our faith in Him, that we're doing the right steps on when we need to leave, and that we are being wise about our decision. So some ways that we can help support survivors is, being a safe place for them to talk about it, to let them feel heard and seen, and then to provide resources to them on how they can get out of the abusive situation, because as we learned, it's the most dangerous time period. And so we need to provide them with a safe place to go, maybe financial resources, maybe childcare. Definitely God and prayer is super important, and we just really need to provide the survivors with these resources, because so many times they go back because they have nowhere else to go, or it's all they know. And so, the more we get the word out about abuse and we can help support their survivors, the safer that they're going to become, and the more these statistics are going to go down, because 75% is super scary, and 500 to 700% increase in danger and in death when leaving is super scary. And so we need to be there, we need to be listening, and we need to be believing these survivors. If this resonates with you, then please like or subscribe to my channel. I'm here to help and support survivors, and I want to do that any way I can. So please like or subscribe.